All right. So, ready to dive into a world where like light and dark aren't just like, metaphors.
Always.
They're like literally the fabric of reality.
Yeah.
We're going to be exploring Yumi and the Nightmare Painter by Brandon Sanderson.
Yes.
A story of two like intertwined worlds, one that's constantly illuminated by this energy called Haiyan,
With a high on. Yeah.
and the other shrouded in this endless night.
Right.
So it's a pretty cool premise.
It's such a cool premise. It's
Yeah.
so simple, and yet he just like blows it up into this whole exploration of art and perception
Right.
and reality itself.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not just like two different settings. It's like two completely different ways of experiencing the world.
Yeah.
So in Fudanoro, that's the city where they have these twin lines of glowing Haiyan, illuminating the sky 24/7. They've never known darkness.
Right.
And it's like, it makes you think like, how would a society like that even conceive of something like a nightmare?
Right. Well, and then on the flip side, you have Torio shrouded in this perpetual darkness.
Right.
The only source of light is like this distant star.
Mm-hmm.
And they've developed this really unique relationship with the spirits that inhabit their world.
Right. That's such a stark contrast.
Yeah.
But like the question I keep coming back to with this deep dive is like, are these worlds truly as separate as they seem?
Totally. That's a big question.
Yeah.
That we kind of like keep circling around.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's something that gets even more intriguing when we meet our main characters.
Sure.
So on the one hand, we have Painter. He's this young man from Futanoro whose art literally captures and neutralizes nightmares.
Like literally, yeah.
Yeah.
Not
And
metaphorically.
not just a hobby.
Yeah.
This is a vital service to his community.
Right.
So can you maybe like talk a little bit about the mechanics of what he does?
Yeah, for sure. So I think that a really important thing to remember is that in Painter's world, nightmares aren't just like bad dreams. They're these like physical manifestations of fear and darkness that emerge from this mysterious substance called the shroud.
Okay, so the shroud.
Yeah.
That seems to be a key element here.
Huge.
Is there any connection between this shroud, which spawns these nightmares, and the Haiyan that's constantly illuminating Painter's world?
Yeah, that's where things get really, really interesting. So the novel hints that both the Haiyan and the shroud are manifestations of investiture, which, if you've read any Sanderson, you'll know, is basically the source of magic in his Cosmere universe. It's kind of like this cosmic energy field that can be accessed and manipulated in different ways, but in like specific ways. And so the Haiyan seems to be this like really controlled, beneficial form of investiture. Whereas the shroud is this more chaotic and dangerous expression of that same power.
I see.
So it's like both sides of the same coin.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then on the flip side, we have Yumi, who is this young woman from Torio, and she communicates with spirits, but through this unique form of art? Rock stacking.
Rock stack.
Yeah, and it seems less about capturing or controlling something and more about establishing a connection, kind of like a harmonious balance.
Totally. And that is like such a good point that really highlights the difference between the two worlds.
Right.
So Painter's art is like reactive, right? He's
Mhm.
constantly battling against this encroaching darkness.
Yeah.
But Yumi's art is more proactive.
Okay.
She's seeking to understand and coexist with the spiritual forces that surround her.
Right.
And it really speaks to a different worldview, a different way of relating to the unseen forces that shape their lives.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, and then Sanderson throws in this wild twist. A body swap.
The body swap.
Painter gets thrown into Yumi's world of like never-ending darkness, and she finds herself in his world of constant light.
Exactly. And I can only imagine the culture shock.
Oh, for sure.
It's just got to be massive.
Yeah, and it's like, imagine Yumi, who's always lived by the rhythms of the stars, suddenly thrown into the city that never sleeps.
Right. Right.
That would be so jarring.
Yeah, and then Painter, he's used to this structured society where everything is illuminated, and now he has to navigate a world where shadows actually hold power.
Right.
That's pretty wild.
It's it's a classic narrative device because it forces both characters and us as readers to confront our own assumptions about reality.
Right, and I love how Sanderson uses this like fish out of water scenario, not only to create humor,
Totally.
but to like explore these deeper themes of identity and perception.
Oh, yeah.
So we see Yumi like struggling to maintain her composure in a society that considers her traditional attire like scandalous.
Right.
While Painter's like grappling with all these strict rituals and hierarchies in Torio. It's this hilarious clash of cultures, but it makes us question our own biases and assumptions. Yeah, totally. And that clash becomes even more pronounced when we consider the differences in their artistic practices.
Right.
So like Yumi's wax stacking, for example.
Right.
That's like deeply tied to her people's spiritual beliefs.
Yeah.
Like each stone and its placement, the way that it interacts with the surrounding landscape, all has like meaning and purpose.
Right.
And it's a far cry from Painter's world, where art is often seen as much more individualistic.
That's super interesting. So it's like their art forms are reflections of their worldviews. Painters trying to like capture and control something external, while Yumi's seeking to harmonize with something inherent in her world.
Right.
But what's truly fascinating is both their abilities, while seemingly like totally different, are somehow connected to investiture.
Yes.
Which is that mysterious source of magic we talked about earlier.
Exactly.
So how does that play out in the story?
So we start to see glimpses of this connection through the character of Design.
Wow.
She's this spirit that like inhabits a bar in Painter's world.
Okay.
She's like a little bit of a trickster figure.
Okay.
You know, dispensing kind of cryptic knowledge, sassy commentary. But she drops some serious hints about the nature of investiture and the possibility that Yumi's world might actually be a result of a god's death.
Wow.
Right.
Yeah, wow.
So she like kind of blows your mind with these cosmological concepts.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
And she suggests that the shroud itself might be a byproduct of that god's death.
Right.
Like a corrupted form of investiture.
Exactly. It's like this chilling thought, especially when you remember that the nightmares that Painter captures are emerging from the shroud.
Right, yeah.
So it's like, oh, are these nightmares like remnants of a god's shattered power?
Wow.
Right. That's a question that kind of hangs over the whole story. Like what initially seems like a very fantastical premise
Right.
starts to take on this deeper, almost philosophical dimension.
Yeah, you're forced to reconsider the nature of nightmares. Like, are they simply figments of our fears?
Right. Are they just in our heads?
Yeah, or are they these echoes of something far more ancient and powerful, something that continues to haunt both worlds?
Exactly. And that's really where we'll leave it for today.
Okay.
We've got these two contrasting worlds, these really unique characters, and this very intriguing connection between art, nightmares, and investiture. But there's so much more to unpack, especially when we start digging into Painter's past.
Right.
And like the secrets that are hidden beneath the surface of both of these worlds.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So stay tuned for part 2, where we delve even deeper into the heart of Yumi and the Nightmare Painter.
Okay, so we left off with some pretty big questions about like the nature of the shroud,
Right.
the origins of nightmares, and the connection between these two, seemingly separate worlds.
Totally.
But before we dive deeper into those mysteries, I think it's worth like exploring Painter's backstory a little bit more. Yeah, for sure.
Because we learn that, he wasn't always this like solitary figure we meet at the beginning of the novel.
Right. He wasn't always like, kind of a lone wolf.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He had friends. He had like a community.
He did.
But something happened that like shattered that connection.
Yeah. And Painter's past is like a really crucial piece of the puzzle here.
Right.
It's not just about like personal drama.
Yeah.
It's about understanding how that isolation and that guilt that he carries has shaped his art and his worldview.
Right.
And even like ultimately his ability to connect with Yumi.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting.
And what we see in those flashbacks, is a young painter who was really talented, but also like deeply insecure.
Okay.
And prone to jealousy. And he made a mistake.
Okay.
A betrayal of trust that cost him those friendships and left him feeling really like an outcast.
And it's interesting how his initial reaction to being swapped into Yumi's world is almost like a relief. He's suddenly free from the expectations and judgments of his own society.
Yeah, it's like a breath of fresh air,
right,
in a way.
Yeah.
But at the same time, he's thrown into this world with completely different social rules and values.
Right, which leads to some awkward and often hilarious encounters.
Oh, yeah, for sure. It's that like classic fish out of water humor.
Right.
But Sanderson uses it to explore something much deeper.
Okay.
In Torio, where sincerity and honesty are so important, Painter's forced to actually confront his past actions.
Right.
He can't hide behind his reputation or his art anymore. He has to be vulnerable. He has to admit his mistakes. And he has to face those consequences.
And it's Yumi who, like, initially finds Painter kind of arrogant and frustrating, who helps him through this process.
Totally.
It's not like a smooth journey or anything.
No, definitely not.
They clash, they argue, they challenge each other's beliefs.
Of course.
But through those conflicts, they start to develop like a genuine understanding and respect for each other.
Yeah, and their relationship, it goes beyond just like, the typical romantic trope. It's about two people helping each other heal and grow as individuals.
And what's like striking about their dynamic is how it like subverts expectations.
Oh, really?
You have Yumi, who comes from this highly structured, ritualistic society, pushing Painter to break free from this self-imposed isolation and reconnect with his friends.
Yeah, it's like she sees through his walls.
Right.
And then you have Painter, who like represents a more individualistic worldview, teaching Yumi to question her assumptions.
Okay.
And embrace her own unique abilities.
Yeah, they act as like catalysts for each other's growth.
They do.
Forcing each other to confront their blind spots and like step outside their comfort zones.
Exactly. And that growth becomes even more important as the story progresses.
Right.
Because remember that bombshell design dropped?
Oh, yeah.
It turns out that Yumi's world isn't a separate planet at all.
What?
It's a region of Painter's world.
No way.
That's been encased by the Shroud.
Wow, that revelation completely like reframes the narrative.
It does.
It's no longer just about these two individuals from different worlds trying to find their way back home.
It's so much bigger than that.
Yeah.
It's about the fate of both worlds and this terrifying truth behind the Shroud's existence.
So the world Yumi knows, with this perpetual darkness and ancient traditions, is actually the result of this like catastrophic event that happened centuries ago.
Right. In Painter's world.
In Painter's world.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it all ties back to this ancient machine.
Okay.
Designed by this group of scholars who were like obsessed with harnessing investiture. They believed that they could attract spirits and tap into their power.
Okay.
By building this massive structure that would act as this focal point for spiritual energy.
Okay.
But their experiment went horribly wrong.
Oh, no.
Instead of attracting like beneficial spirits, they inadvertently created a conduit for something far darker and more powerful.
I see. So the machine, in its attempt to manipulate investiture, ended up draining the souls of everyone in that region.
Yes.
Creating the Shroud and transforming those souls into the very nightmares that plague Painter's world.
Exactly. And the scholars themselves, they were twisted and corrupted.
Oh, wow.
They became these monstrous guardians of the machine, forever trapped by their own ambition.
So it's like this chilling cautionary tale about the hubris of trying to control forces beyond our comprehension.
It is, yeah.
And it sets up this like truly epic conflict.
It does.
Painter and Yumi, along with this like ragtag group of Painter's friends, have to find a way to shut down the machine, destroy the Shroud, and hopefully free the souls trapped within it.
It's a battle against not just monstrous nightmares, but also like the legacy of those scholars.
Yeah.
The consequences of their unchecked ambition.
What I find particularly compelling is that it's not just this simple good versus evil scenario.
Right.
The scholars, despite their monstrous forms, aren't like inherently malicious.
Right.
They're victims of their own creation, consumed by regret and despair.
That's one of the things that makes Sanderson's writing so great.
Right.
He avoids those easy answers and those simplistic moral judgments, even in a fantasy setting. He presents characters who are flawed and complex and capable of both great and terrible things.
Yeah, the scholars are a perfect example of that.
They are.
Their intentions, at least initially, were noble. They wanted to push the boundaries of knowledge and harness a power they believe could benefit humanity.
Of course.
But their arrogance and their refusal to consider the potential consequences led to this disaster that continues to haunt both worlds.
It did.
So we have these two characters from vastly different worlds, each with their unique skills and perspectives, thrown together to confront this threat that neither of them could have anticipated.
Right.
So how do their individual journeys, their growth as individuals, contribute to this ultimate confrontation?
That's where Sanderson's masterful character development comes into play.
Okay.
He takes us on these parallel journeys of self-discovery, showing how Painter and Yumi's experiences, both together and apart, prepare them for this final battle.
Okay.
Painter. Through his forced confrontation with his past, and his growing relationship with Yumi, learns to let go of his guilt and embrace his true potential as an artist.
Let us see.
He realizes that his art isn't just about capturing nightmares. It's about understanding them. It's about seeing the pain and fear that lies beneath the surface.
Okay.
And Yumi, who initially struggles to adapt to a world that seems chaotic and disrespectful of tradition, begins to question the rigid structure of her own upbringing.
Okay.
She sees the value of individuality, of challenging norms, of embracing new experiences.
Right.
And most importantly, she starts to believe in herself,
Okay.
in her power, in her ability to shape the world around her.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a beautiful transformation to witness.
It is, and it's this newfound belief in herself, in her connection to the spirits, and the power of her art that ultimately allows Yumi to unleash her full potential.
Okay.
The climax of the novel is this breathtaking battle against a literal army of nightmares. And it's Yumi who steals the show.
Really?
She becomes this conduit for investiture,
Okay.
manipulating the shroud, the very source of the nightmares, to create a flying tree for escape, and later to subdue the nightmares themselves.
Wow, that's amazing.
Like a visual spectacle
Right?
that showcases Sanderson's talent for imaginative world building.
Yeah.
But it's also a powerful metaphor for the power of belief to shape reality.
It's like what we see in that climactic battle is a convergence of everything we've explored so far.
Yes.
The interconnectedness of the two worlds.
The destructive consequences of unchecked ambition, the transformative power of art,
Right.
and the ultimate triumph of belief over fear.
Exactly. But the question remains, what happens after the battle?
Yeah.
How do Painter and Yumi deal with the aftermath of this world-altering event?
Right.
And what becomes of their relationship now that the fate of both worlds hangs in the balance?
Yeah, good questions. Okay, so last we left off, Painter and Yumi are like standing amidst the wreckage of that epic battle.
Right, right.
The shroud, like the very source of the nightmares, has been disrupted.
It has.
The machine's in ruins, its power's broken. But what does that actually mean for like the people whose souls were trapped inside it? For like the very existence of Yumi's world?
Yeah, that's the big question.
Yeah.
And this is where Sanderson doesn't shy away from the bittersweet complexities of his narrative, you know?
Okay.
The destruction of the machine doesn't just erase the shroud,
Right.
It reverts it back to its original form. So it goes back to being
The souls of the Torish people.
wow.
Just imagine like those souls suspended in that in-between state for centuries, suddenly released, like free to choose their own destiny.
So in a sense, the destruction of the shroud is also like the destruction of Yumi's world as she knew it.
It is.
That's got to be a heart-wrenching realization.
Yeah, even amidst the victory, there's this
Right.
there's this element of loss.
Yeah, so Sanderson handles that with this delicate balance of sorrow and hope.
He does.
These souls that were freed from their tormented existence within the shroud, they don't just vanish.
Yeah.
They choose to remain in Painter's world,
Right.
becoming like spirits that coexist with the people of Futenoro.
It's pretty beautiful.
It is.
It's like a testament to the enduring power of connection,
Right.
The idea that even across these seemingly insurmountable divides, there can be this understanding and coexistence.
So the two worlds, once separated by darkness and misunderstanding, now merge in this unexpected way.
Yeah, it's a poignant resolution.
It is.
But, where does Yumi fit into all of this?
Yeah, that's a good question. Where does she fit in this new reality?
Yeah, well, Yumi's choice is perhaps the most heart-wrenching of all.
Okay.
She decides to rejoin the souls of her people.
Oh, wow.
To become a powerful spirit herself.
So she doesn't go back to Painter's world.
She doesn't, she recognizes that while her bond with Painter is profound,
Right.
her connection to her people, to her heritage, is ultimately what defines her.
That must have been a really difficult decision, especially after everything they went through together.
It was, and their final goodbye. It's a real testament to the depth of their love.
Right.
The recognition that sometimes true love means letting go.
Yeah.
Allowing each other to follow their own paths.
It's not a complete separation, though, right?
It's not. Sanderson leaves us with the suggestion that their connection, it transcends those physical boundaries.
Okay.
That Yumi's spirit lingers, watching over Painter and the world they both thought to save.
There's a lot to unpack there, emotionally and thematically.
Totally.
It makes you think about the different forms love can take. the sacrifices we make for the people we care about,
Right.
and the enduring power of connection, even in the face of loss.
Absolutely, and it ties back to those, like, swirling patterns of Haiyan in Painter's world and the intricate rock formations in Yumi's world.
Yeah.
Those visual elements that weren't just there for aesthetic purposes.
Right.
They represented the interconnectedness of their worlds, the merging of, like, art and belief and reality.
Right.
A concept that really comes full circle in this poignant ending.
Yeah, speaking of poignant moments, there were so many scenes throughout the novel that, like, resonated with me.
For sure.
That scene where Yumi experiences a carnival for the first time.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Like the sheer joy and wonder she expresses.
It was infectious.
It was infectious.
Remember how captivated she was by, like, the games, the rides, the food? It was like seeing the world through her innocent, wonder-filled eyes.
It was.
And for Painter, it was this chance to share something that he loved with someone who saw its beauty anew.
Right.
It was a real turning point for their relationship, where they could, like, let go of their fears and just enjoy the moment.
Yeah, and it reminds us that even amidst these, like, world-ending threats and these complex philosophical dilemmas,
Totally.
there's still room for simple joys, for those shared experiences that connect us on a human level.
Yeah, absolutely.
And speaking of those dilemmas, let's not forget about, like, the unsettling nature of the nightmares themselves.
Right.
Sanderson's descriptions of these creatures are so vivid and terrifying.
They're
not just monsters.
Right.
They're manifestations of our, like, deepest anxieties, given form by the shroud. It makes you think about, like, the nature of fear itself.
Totally.
How it can distort our perceptions and even manifest into something tangible.
Exactly.
And then there's design.
Oh, design, yes.
This sassy, all-knowing spirit who runs a bar.
Right, and dispenses cryptic wisdom about investiture in other worlds.
Yes. She's such a delightful character, full of wit and intrigue.
She is. She's a perfect example of Sanderson's ability to create these, like, memorable characters.
Yeah.
Even ones who only appear briefly. She serves as this guide, a source of humor,
Right.
and a reminder that there are forces at play beyond our understanding.
Yeah, and finally, gotta mention that climactic battle against the Army of Nightmares.
Oh, yeah.
It was Sanderson's spectacle at its finest.
It was a visual and emotional roller coaster.
Right.
It highlighted not only the power of individual growth, but the strength that comes from collaborating,
Right.
from believing in each other,
Yeah.
and fighting for something greater than yourself.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Yumi and the Nightmare Painter, I'm left with this, like, lingering question.
Okay.
What if we all have the potential to be nightmare painters or yokihyo in our own way? What if our beliefs, our passions, our creative endeavors can actually shape the reality we experience?
That's a thought-provoking idea, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The novel reminds us that there's more to the world than meets the eye, that there are these, like, hidden connections and unseen forces that shape our lives.
Totally.
It encourages us to embrace our creativity,
Right.
to question our assumptions,
Yeah.
and to believe in the power of connection, even across these, like, seemingly insurmountable divides.
Absolutely.
It's a story that stays with you long after you finish reading it.
It does.
It prompts you to look at the world with a sense of wonder and possibility.
It really does.
If you haven't already, I highly recommend diving into Yumi and the Nightmare Painter.
It's an amazing book.
It's a journey worth taking.